Happy Friday, Miami. This is Peter Zalewski. I'm a condo consultant, also founder of the Miami Condo Investing Club. You are tuning in for Buy, Sell, Hold Miami, a real estate podcast where we talk straight about what's going on in the real estate market in South Florida. I'm joined here with my co-host, Daniel Hernandez from Compass Real Estate. His office is over in Coconut Grove. He does single-family houses as well as condos. We're going to spend the next hour or so discussing some of the stories we think are interesting from a local's perspective. So with that being said, here's a baton, Daniel. Take over.
What's up, Peter? Happy Friday.
Finally made it. We're coming up to the end of Q3. I'm very excited about that.
I know, but I think we're going to talk about that a little bit next week. But what's up, everybody? Welcome. End of September, end of Q3, as Peter will remind you several more times throughout this show. But this is Buy, Sell, Hold Miami. So if you're just joining us for the first time, this is episode 19th. It is September the 26th, 2025. We've almost been doing this for half a year, Peter. Every week, every Friday live. So if you're just joining us for the first time today, my name is Daniel Hernandez, as Peter pointed out. And what we do is we pick 5 topics every week. And you can see that down in the bottom left of your screen. We call that the rundown. And so we got 60 minutes with you, and we got about 7 minutes with each topic. If we go a little bit over, that's okay. We have overtime for that. And then at the end of each topic, Peter and I are either going to buy, we're going to sell, or we're going to hold because maybe there's not enough information. And sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, and that's what makes the show interesting. So with that, we only got you for 60 minutes. So let's butt heads, Peter. About a year ago, in what I'll call an effort to stay relevant, our governor, Ron DeSantis, proposed something kind of incredible. Down here in Florida, we don't pay income tax. So our government coffers, municipal, county, state, schools, they're filled by property tax. It's about 2% here in Miami-Dade County. And Governor Ron DeSantis proposed sort of the unthinkable. Hey guys, why don't we eliminate property taxes? I'd love to pay less taxes, but it gets kind of weird there because what is going to be the revenue for these municipalities? I mean, we know here in Miami-Dade, we had a $402 million budget shortfall just this past summer. And so if we cut property taxes, which, by the way, I looked it up, $55 billion a year comes from property taxes. 19 billion of that comes from homesteaded properties. So I think the governor's proposal is to cut back the taxes from homesteaded properties, that meaning $19 billion. So that would leave a $19 billion budget gap in all these municipalities. And if we know anything about municipal administration down here in South Florida, is that we don't want to put too much on their plate. So presenting them with billions of dollars to fill seems, well, kind of a difficult thing to do, especially for somebody, a city administrator who makes probably low 6 figures and has to live in workforce housing. But that's something else we're going to talk about today. Peter, what have you read into this property tax boondoggle that we're presented with in Tallahassee?
Okay, just so everybody's on the same page, I just want to point out that that 2% property tax, a third's going to the school board, a third's going to the county, and a third's going to the city. So everybody basically is involved with trying to keep the hustle going. They need to have higher prices. Why? Because then they get more money in their coffers. I like to say during the Great Recession, City of Miami had a junk bond rating. The credit rating for the city of Miami was junk bond status. It was horrible. It was like a subprime borrower. And why did it have that? Because real estate prices started to free fall when we went through the Great Recession. We had too many condos that were built. So other places like Fort Lauderdale and Boca Raton, they realized too that they were anti-development. But then when the Great Recession hit, they weren't diversified enough. So they then started building all the new towers you're seeing in Fort Lauderdale as well as Boca Raton. So that's kind of a fundamental aspect. The other part you need to keep in mind is if you want to deal with property taxes, you want to bring them in the line, my opinion, what you do is you eliminate the homestead. You
You
eliminate the homestead.
eliminate the homestead.
Now,
That's
stop before
that's
you get
not going to be
excited.
very popular.
And anybody who doesn't know, in Florida, if you are a primary resident, you get to claim something that's called a homestead exemption. If you claim a homestead exemption, you're going to get locked in at a certain price. So all of your property taxes going forward will be locked in, and they'll only increase based on inflation, which we all know has not been good. Remember, it was up to 9.1%. Now we're sitting at 2.9%. So, and there's a cap on it. I think it's CPI or 3% annually.
It's
What it can
it's
go up.
3%
Anyways,
annually if it's homesteaded, and if it's not homesteaded, it's 10%.
then it can effectively float. So what I'm telling you is there's a bunch of people who have had places forever and ever and ever. They can't afford to sell because if they go to a new place and they get priced out, their tax going forward, it's going to be based on
Right.
2%. It's going to be much higher. So you have a lot of people with too much space. They simply have had the buildings, the houses 20, 30, 40 years. They can't afford to leave. So they have excess. And why do they have excess? Because there was something called portability. Again, not to get all bogged down in it, but what I say is lift the homestead. If you lift the homestead, now suddenly everybody's going to get assessed at the appropriate price. And those people who are in these mansions that they've had for 30 and 40 years that are now worth $2 million, but they paid 150 grand on, and they're paying a tax based on $150,000. I think that would go a long way towards selling it all off. But ultimately, what I would argue this entire thing's about, because remember, how they're going to fund it if they get rid of the property taxes, they're going to put in place some sort of tourist tax. They're also going to, here, I'm looking at a story from Florida Politics. They say the three ways they're going to pay for it is there'll be real estate transaction costs. So they're going to jack up the fees to do a real estate deal. They're also going to hit everybody with a new sales tax. And then there's going to be surcharges for tourists. Think H-1B visa. President Trump announced that if you are H-1B
Okay.
a visa holder, it's going to be 100 grand a person to come annually. Why doesn't Governor DeSantis simply charge everybody, I don't know, $1,000 if you want to visit Florida? Why not stick with that rationale? They're not going to do it. But then the final point I would tell you is really this is a power grab, my opinion. What they're trying to do is the state's trying to concentrate power into the state. Therefore, everything become a statewide, and the
Take it
state can
away from the
decide.
county. Right.
Yeah, you get money, you don't get money. Well, right now, all of these entities are operating on their own simply from the fact that they're all playing off of the property tax. And those counties, like South Florida, who are probably donating more than they're getting back, hence the bridge that we're doing right there in Greater Downtown Miami by the Performing Arts Center, the Spider Bridge or whatever they're calling it. This one with all these great
Signature bridge.
shapes.
Signature bridge.
Yeah, signature bridge. That's an example of how money had to be given back because we were simply sending too much up to Tallahassee. We weren't getting it back in place. So really, I think this is a power move to shift all of the power to Tallahassee, take it away from the local politicians, and then the governor, whoever that is, can decide you've been good, you get money. You haven't been good, you're not going to get money. Much like what we're seeing in Washington D.C. right now. That's my take on it.
That's really interesting. And I'm not a fan. Opinion drives this show at Buy Sell Hold Miami. And for the history of forever, as long as I can look back at it, in South Florida, all commerce, our economy is driven by development, 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 development. And we've talked about it on the show. There's sort of this vicious cycle, this vicious circle that we have. Developers buy something, they tear it down, they make something shinier and newer. It's worth more money, more property taxes. The city gets to collect those property taxes. So if we eliminate property taxes, who's kissing the politicians' asses now? Pardon my French. What, Simon Mall is going to be the new lobbyist in City Hall? Because if Related Group isn't kissing City Hall butt, then who is? Because somebody is gaining revenue from whatever property tax scheme is happening. If it's sales tax and we double the sales tax, they've talked about doubling the sales tax because I guess that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the simplest thing to do. Right now in the state of Florida, we have 6% sales tax. If we double it to 12%, that'll fill at least part of the gap. They talked about a 5% transaction fee. Did you see that article? Just a straight up 5% transaction fee. And once you pay that transaction fee when you're purchasing your property, then you don't have to pay any more property tax. That was something else proposed. There's going to be a ton of things proposed between now and next November when they are at least trying to put it on the ballot. I believe they don't need to amend the Constitution of the state of Florida. We just need 60% of the voters to vote for this thing, whatever the proposal would be, and then they could execute it. At least that's my understanding. I'm not a lawyer, but that's just what I've read from Tallahassee Democrat.
I mean, I think the problem is what Tallahassee, which is where the capital of Florida is, it's located way the hell north. I mean, you want to drive to Tallahassee from Miami. What is it, Daniel? 5-hour ride? It's like going to FSU,
No,
Florida
it's
State.
5 hours just to get to the Panhandle. It's probably
Yeah,
7,
okay,
8.
yeah, I mean, they're practically in a different time zone from all of South Florida.
Very
And
close to
I
it,
think what
sure.
Yeah, and I think what's happening is the real power structure of this area is occurring down here in the Tri-County South Florida area. And Tallahassee, South Florida doesn't necessarily always agree. I mean, there's a DOGE effort, Department of Government Efficiency, that's currently underway. Where were the two places they went to take a look at in terms of the governor? Where did he sig them? He sigged them on Broward County, which is hardcore Democrat, tends to be a vote Democrat, and he sigged them on Gainesville. Where the University of Florida is located, because we're kind of moving to a phase. It seems like where Washington and the politics up in Washington are starting to control kind of what's going on in the state of Florida. Like, remember, the state of Florida was very, very fast moving in terms of the immigration policy that President Trump announced. That's why we set up Alligator Alcatraz.
Right.
And I don't know what the latest is. Supposedly they're shutting it down. A judge ruled. I don't know what the appeals
The
are. You're
Herald
not hearing
hasn't
as much
written
about
a
it.
thing about it in weeks. I don't know what's going on. Maybe there's no news, is no news good news. I'm not sure. What I do know is that there are about I want to say 67 counties in the state of Florida. 51 of them count on property tax revenue as their single largest revenue driver.
Yeah, I'm sure that's most counties. I mean, we got a few exceptions when things are rocking and rolling, but at the end of the day, this is the point I want everybody to recognize. Okay, if you come to Florida, I want you to know if you spend money here, most likely you are paying for our infrastructure. We build stuff by bonding it out, and then the bonds are paid for by tourist tax. A rent a car, a
Right.
hotel, getting on a cruise, going through Miami International Airport. Why? Because you are effectively subsidizing us to live here. And how is the subsidy occurs primarily through the role of a homestead exemption. So out of towners are paying for us. Why don't we just go and hit everybody? Hit them. You want to come to Florida? It's going to be $500
Well,
if
and,
you
and
fly
that's
in.
and
It's
that's
one hundred
that's the
dollars
argument
if you enter state.
that's the argument for the sales tax. What, you're not going to go to Disney anymore? You're not going to go on a cruise? You're not going to pick up the cruise ship industry and send it to Savannah, Georgia, or Charleston, South Carolina? What, are you going to move Disney to Georgia? They're not going to do it. The sales tax increase, again, probably the most obvious thing to do, but it will also harm middle and low income residents here, people who aren't homeowners. There are plenty of people here who are not homeowners who do not have a dog in this fight, and they're going to cut the property tax, and then all these people who are renters who are not homeowners are just going to get smacked. So I'm a sell on it. I'm a homeowner. I like the status quo. I like the status quo. There was some talk about making limiting homestead property tax assessed values to keep in step with inflation. Okay, I'm a fan of that. I do think that's fair because it's been 25,000 and 25,000 for forever. So maybe if the second 25,000 goes up to, I don't know, 25,700 next year, and then 26,300 the year after that. All right, maybe that's a nice little compromise. But to eliminate the thing entirely, hard sell.
Yeah. And I said this on WLRN. I called up when they do their program, it's the NPR affiliate. I'm like, listen, you want to deal with this? Lift the homestead exemption. Let the market play out. Don't take a socialistic approach where you're giving certain people an exemption. Why? Because they showed up first. It's kind of like a not in my backyard type of situation. Well, I got mine, so nobody else gets it. So you want to let the market float, let it float. But I also don't want all the power being shifted up in Tallahassee, because the way they think in Tallahassee versus the way
Very
people think in a
different.
local county, it's dramatically different. So I am a sell, pound the table, sell. No, 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 no.
Look at
Unless
it.
unless they say we will do that, and now your insurance is included in your ownership cost, because
Well, no,
they've done
how could they
studies.
possibly do that? You can't control the private market. Oh, wait, you can do that now.
We got citizens. Let citizens do
Citizens,
it.
they've
I
been
mean,
kicking people off of Citizens in droves at every opportunity they can get. I thought this was a free state of Florida, quote unquote. That's a quote. That's not me saying it. You can't turn it into a completely socialist program. Oh no, socialism.
if you listen to radio talk call-in shows, like, again, I listen to WLRN. Why? Because it's local news, it's reporters. I got a pretty good idea of the way that they operate. The calls that always come out every time they talk about property tax, what does everybody talk about? Listen, property tax is fine. Let's deal with insurance. The insurance is the one that's really kind of got people all wound up. So Governor DeSantis, all due respect, if you want to focus on something, why don't you focus on the insurance, and getting that under control, I think, would be much more beneficial and helpful, and kind of leave the property tax fight for another day.
You heard it here. Peter Zalewski, buy, sell, hold Miami. We're both selling. On to the next one. Lincoln Road, which I have not patronized since, well, I can't tell you the last time I went to Lincoln Road, but it's getting a revamp. $29.4 million, which doesn't seem like a whole lot. If let's start with that. But they're revamping Lincoln Road, $29.4 million upgrade. That includes these sweeping projects along Drexel and Meridian, which are the north-south avenues that span Lincoln Road. If you've never been to Lincoln Road, if you're joining us from out of state, Lincoln Road is a pedestrian mall that goes from Alton Road, which is on the west side of Miami Beach, all the way to the beach. The last two eastern blocks aren't pedestrianized, like where the Ritz-Carlton is, but because of that new ultra-luxury Ritz-Carlton project that they're putting up, there's a lobbying push to pedestrianize those final two blocks, which I'm a big fan of. I don't know what it's going to do to the traffic patterns that are already horrendous on Miami Beach, but that's for another day. So there's this whole plan to revitalize this stretch of Lincoln Road, which, as I understand it, I'm too young to really speak to this. Maybe you can speak to it. But in the 90s, Lincoln Road was a no-go zone, and then they had some tenant selection, and it grew and it grew and it grew, and then they opened up what was that place, Yucca, and it became sort of a cool kids local hotspot. And then over the course of the last 20 years or so, it's just completely washed out. They got an Apple store that anchors it. They had the movie theater, the Regal Cinema, that just closed now. They're gone. It's going to turn into some, traveling carnival museum sort of thing. They
Hey,
had
remember we
the
talked about the
Carney
history of
Sweetwater.
carnivals,
Yeah.
the carnies in South Florida.
I will say that my favorite building in town, which speaks to Miami, is that the parking garage at 1111 Lincoln Road is probably the most beautiful parking garage anyone's ever seen. If we do anything right in this town, it's build nice parking garages. The design district
And
has
it wasn't
beautiful
a
parking
local.
garages. It wasn't a
I
local.
remember I did consulting on that project. It was not a local. The guy was from Europe, and he
Well,
hired a
very European,
European.
and I mean, talk about a guy, talk about a vanity investment, right? So he has his outdoor parking garage with like 25-foot ceilings. It is the most inefficient use of space ever, 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 ever. It's like Steve Jobs invented this thing, and then to top it off, he put a single condo on the top of this thing. Very, very cool. But in any event, so Lincoln Road sort of fell into, I don't want to say despair, but there's a ton of for lease signs all up and down Lincoln Road. A lot of the big tenants pulled out unless you're one of these large multinationals like Apple or Starbucks. And because of the rise of neighborhoods like the Design District and Wynwood and the shops over at Bell Harbor, if you're an out-of-town corporation looking for somewhere to plant your flag, is Lincoln Road on your list? I don't think it has been for some time.
All right, now I'm going to give you my take on it. You ready? Are you ready?
Go.
So okay, so this is what we got. The city of Miami Beach, generally speaking, I want everybody to get a big picture idea. I want you to think of a teeter-totter. The heavy part of the teeter-totter is going to be South Beach. The light part, which is in the air, is going to be North Beach. Everybody who works in North Beach, they tend to work. That lives in North Beach, they work in South Beach. That's generally speaking kind of the way it works. Now, Lincoln Road, I got here in 1993. I lived off of Meridian and 8th Street. So I was about 8 blocks down. Lincoln Road starts about 16 and a half or so. It's about 8 blocks from east to west or from west to east, basically from Bay or intercoastal to the Atlantic. If we got roughly $30 million going into it with 8 blocks, we're talking about close to $4 million a block in terms of doing stuff in
It
the
doesn't seem
pedestrian
like a
area.
lot.
It depends. I got a feeling somebody's brother-in-law, sister-in-law, good friend, significant other probably got the contract or is going to get some of these contracts. So, but that's my take on it. Just like Flagler Street in Greater Downtown Miami, which again is going to take another couple years to
Well,
go.
isn't the Ritz, the developers who are redoing the Ritz throwing something like $12 million just on that alleyway?
Well, there we go. And that is a good thing. But let me take you back to 1993. 1993, effectively, when I got here, I lived across from a house. At the time, you call it a crack den. People don't do crack, I don't think, anymore. Now it's meth
We
or
still call them
whatever the
crack
hell they're
dens,
doing.
though.
All right, so you still call it a crack den. So back at the time, the big issue was there wasn't even permit parking, and when you wanted to do something, you basically had Alton Road. Excuse me, you had Washington Avenue, which is going east. That was like the bars. Then you had Ocean Drive, where it was cool. It was kind of up and coming. It wasn't necessarily there. And then you had Lincoln Road, but Lincoln Road was filled with a bunch of places that were independent. Excuse me, individually owned. Think tchotchkes. Think of like your grandparents having a tourist shop selling T-shirts and like mugs and stuff. That's
Sure.
primarily what it was. There was really nothing to see there. There was a books and books open up there. That was like a whole big deal. Then they had a little cinema in the back, or a little like a place you could watch, like I think they were like on a projector. You could watch movies and stuff like that. And then Mara Rubel, relative of Steve Rubel, the guy from Studio 54. She comes down here and she buys a building right there on, I think it was, what would that be? Maybe Meridian and Lincoln Road. She buys this building, she restores it. She's got all kind of juice from New York City. And once she does that, she's able to convince Sony. At the time, Sony Pictures was like a big deal, Sony Music, all that type of stuff. It was a big deal. She brings in Sony, leveraging her relationship. I'm sure she gave it away in terms of the rent. Once Sony got here, remember, Versace was doing his thing at the time on Ocean Drive. Versace got here. He was the gentleman who ultimately ended up getting murdered in 1997 by that
Stabbed or
guy Andrew
shot, I
Cunanan.
forget. Yeah.
Yeah. So 97, I would say, was probably the peak of South Beach. Believe it or not, from the international rock star effect. But Mara Rebel, who now has, remember, she had a place in Wynwood, and now she's in Alapata. Or where the Rebel family, they kind of have their thing
Sure.
going on. So Lincoln Road was nothing. It was cheap food, cheap tchotchke types of. When I say tchotchke, think of like these old ass stores that the grandparents have had for 40 years. You walk in there, there's nothing you want to buy. The only thing you want to do is ask directions or maybe use the restroom. That's what it was filled with. There was virtually nothing around there. They actually took one of the spaces and they turned it into like an art center, like a co-op, where all these local artists could come and basically display their stuff. And it was virtually free. It was right there, catty corner from where Starbucks went in, and then across from Apple Store. So that's what it was back then. You had buskers. You had if you wanted to learn to rollerblade, that would be the place to do it because there was nobody
Right,
there.
right, right.
No,
I think
no.
I might have learned how to rollerblade on Lincoln Road. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then Mara comes. The rebels make their investment. She gets actively involved. They do a whole variety of things. It starts to really blow up. You got the movies being made in South Beach. Again, it probably peaks around the time of Gianni Versace. And once he gets murdered in 1997, it starts to change. Then we go through September 11th. We go through September 11th, which is September of 2001, and many of these places. Remember Prince had a nightclub on Washington.
Did
He
he
had a
actually?
nightclub.
No kidding.
Yeah, he had a nightclub on Washington. Remember Madonna? Madonna used to live here. Her lover is the daughter of one of the big glass suppliers for these condo towers that are being put up. The blue glass you see that's hurricane resistant, all that type
Yeah,
of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, so she used to be down here. Madonna was down here, and it was real gritty. It was like it was something to see, and Lincoln Road really wasn't what it was. And then you started to get the triple A credit rated firms moving in, and as these firms moved in, they were, it was changing the whole face of it. You could go get a cheap beer, you could talk shit, meet all kind of characters, buskers, stuff like that, and then you start getting all of let's call them the suburban type of retailers, Williams Sonoma, if you will. And
Banana
remember,
Republic,
yeah,
Nespresso.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what that does is, and I looked this up in 2014, Terra Nova comes in and they start buying retail space. According to Miami Herald story from August of 14, $342 million. They bought 6 properties on Lincoln Road. So
Yeah,
what
what
they
was that
did is they
like? I
were more.
remember when that happened. That was like 2015, right?
Yeah, August of 2014. So what happened is once they came in, they started knocking off the old places. Now there was one remnants of what Lincoln Road used to be. This guy's mother and father had a place right next to the Sony building where Mira Rebel was. Again, Meridian and Lincoln Road. I think there's like a Forever 21 or something there now, or I don't know. I'm not a retail person. So there was a place called Zeke's. The
Zeeks.
parents owned it. Yeah, Zeke, Zeke. So the parents owned it, and the kid opened it up, and they didn't have any rent or anything. I mean, mortgage was paid off. It was a back in the day place, little shithole. And his angle was, okay, you can come here and drink. A beer is $2 if it's domestic and 3 if it's an import. and hot dogs were like $1. But he was on the road. He was on Lincoln Road. You get shit faced for $20. You would meet like everybody. It was kind of like the corner before the corner. It was the Tobacco Road. Then things started to change. They leased it out, and then Zeke makes a comeback. They open again several years later after the Terra Nova situation, and then since then, basically is gone.
Just
So what
been
I'm telling you
dead.
is we went from we went from an old, rundown, antiquated place to suddenly Sony came and that put us on the map. Remember MTV Latin America? They had an office there right at Washington. You know where the McDonald's is on Washington and Lincoln
Yeah, I
Road?
remember in that
Yeah,
it's like a tan-ish building.
yeah. So
With
I went to see a
the
live.
McDonald's, you could it had a pedestrian drive-through. You could rollerblade through the drive-through
Exactly, exactly. I actually saw a live Unplugged back in the day when MTV used to do like Unplugged. I saw
when
an
they actually played
MTV
music videos. Right.
where they actually played music. It was because they were focused on the Spanish language music. And remember, right around before the tech bubble, the .com busted, they were trying to turn Lincoln Road into Silicon Beach. This was the place where the startups would come and the Silicon Valley like money would come, and you could converge and you could kind of do some stuff. Which is why L&R built the office building a couple blocks down in Washington. So all of it was coming, but dude, where it was versus where it reached and then where it's gone, dramatically different. And I don't know that they get it back. Why? Because everything is shifted over the causeway, and because it's all shifted over the causeway, a lot of people reverted back to what they used to call causeway kids. If you didn't live on the beach and you came and visited just for the beach for the day and to screw around, and you got drunk and you're pissing in somebody's bushes, or whatever you were doing, I think those days are gone. I think now you just go there for the sand personally, and you're not spending the
But
time in Miami Beach.
what about the people that live there? And we've talked about this in the past, Peter. What about the firms like the high finance, the traders, the alternative asset managers who are renting high-end real estate on the beach? They don't want to drive to Coconut Grove to go do whatever the hell they want to do. They don't want to drive to the design district, albeit the design district is sort of kind of close. But imagine if they had something to do on the beach, and Lincoln Road could be very nice. Will 30-ish million dollars get it back to where it needs to be? I mean, I don't think Lincoln Road by any means is ugly as it
No.
sits right
Lincoln
now.
Road,
It's gorgeous.
dude. It's
But I
historically
mean,
it's historically significant. Morris Lapidus, the guy who designed the Fontainebleau, the guy who designed the building right next to it, he's the one who put together Lincoln Road, came up with this whole concept,
it's
and the
cool.
idea was,
It's got the
yeah,
benches and it flows and it's pretty. So maybe $30 million gets them there. But I just want to know what they're gonna do. And I'm gonna pull it up. We gotta go over the
they're
next topic. But
yeah,
I want to pull up the map just so we can see it.
yeah. I mean, the idea of it was to go from the ocean to the bay. You could
Right.
just go from one end to the other. Back in the day, and
Exactly.
yeah, but
And with the
listen, this is like giving Botox to somebody. This is like lipstick on a pig, if you will. What they need to
but
do is they
that's
need
the
to
Miami
rethink.
way.
But spending the money on Lincoln Road, and people are simply going to pop in like you do in North Bay Village, and then they're going to leave. They're not going to make
But
it a
but
destination.
but yeah. But Lincoln, you can't say Lincoln Road the same as North Bay Village. You're not just driving through Lincoln Road. North Bay Village. What are you going to do in North Bay Village? Go to Benihana?
But but
Uh,
but where it went wrong, and let's not gloss over this. Where it went wrong is during the pandemic. Everybody remember during the pandemic we were all in lockdown. You couldn't do anything. Then certain states like Florida started saying, "Hey, you don't need to wear a mask." Remember, masks were mandatory in a lot of places. You don't need to wear a mask. You can come down here and you could twerk on a police car. Many people came down. They took up the city and the government officials on that offer. I'm being sarcastic of twerking on police cars. It started to spread kind of a reputation of chaos, of which led to a whole variety of people coming down here. I think the story that scared the hell out of a lot of people is a couple, a father, a son, and his wife that were sitting having lunch on Ocean Drive, looking out at the park and at the ocean and the palm trees and the Art
sure.
Deco. Some guy came up to the family and said, pointed a gun and said, today's the day you're going to die, I guess, to the son. The father stepped
Nice.
in front and was murdered right on Ocean Drive.
No,
Stories like
really.
that. Yeah. No, dude, this thing went international. It was almost like a Versace type of just like crazy. You would not expect this. Stories like that just sort of went all off. It was part of this chaos that happened after the comeback of the pandemic when we were getting back into it. So, what the city of Miami Beach needs to do is they need to really make sure they can return it back to this gritty, not gritty, but more of like an up and coming type of place. And you've had all this talk about the what was it, spring Memorial Day? You had the Memorial Day shooting. There was an incident where police officers opened fire like 116 shots into a car.
Right.
It's had a lot of situations where you would feel a little, it's a little suspect. And I think that plus the new development going on on the mainland is really what sort of led to where we are. So yeah, spend money on Lincoln Road. It's fine, whatever. But you need to reposition the branding, because the branding in a lot of people's minds, at least in my mind, is father, son, and his significant other are sitting there, and some guy walks up and the father's dead. And police ultimately caught the guy, but that's this is the middle of the day. This is like afternoon on Ocean Drive. Those are the stories that I think scared the hell out of a lot of people.
Peter, I got to keep us honest with time. You buy, selling, or hold it on Lincoln Road?
I'm a sell. I don't think it makes a difference. I think it's like
You don't
Flagler.
think it makes a difference? I'm more hopeful. I don't think it's enough though. I think it's going to take more heavy lifting than $29 million. I don't think
Yep.
for the span of that giant swath east to west of Miami Beach, $29 million. It's a drop in the bucket. It's a step in the right direction, but the hoopla around it, they just spent what, $500 million, $600 million to build a hotel at the convention center. You can't find some more change in the sofa cushions for Lincoln Road? I mean, really, what's going to drive more commerce? The entire swath of retail on Lincoln Road that's every freaking day, or a convention center hotel? I don't know. My 2 cents. I'm buying, but I think it needs to be more. You're selling. It's okay if we disagree. But what we do both agree on, and it happened, they did it, unanimous vote, City of Miami Commission. They're selling the Olympia, the Gusman, Old Man Gusman's Theater. I think the transaction price was $10, which is just about the price of a cup of coffee in Coconut Grove today. So yeah, the Gusman is sold. There are some stipulations, which I think are good things. First off, they got 5 years to do it. It needs tens of millions of dollars in renovations. It hasn't been really operating for 20 years ish.
Wow.
Deal stipulates that aside from that renovation, everything has to be for education and civic purposes, and it has to be open to the public for some sort of performing arts, civic engagement, at least 180 days out of the year, which I think was a great negotiation. I mean, what do they open the Kaseya Center, FTX, whatever it's called now, the AAA, we still call it, where the Heat play? How much is that? How often is that open to the public? And that was paid with taxpayer dollars. So the Olympia, we were pro this deal weeks ago when we spoke about it. Now it's official. I think the Gusman family is happy, vindicated even. But if they don't execute, which I have all the faith that the Pitbull-backed school, SLAM it's called, it's an acronym for something, will follow through and turn this into this great Performing Arts Academy. But if they don't, after 5 years, it will revert back to the city, and God knows what's going to happen after that.
So I guess the question I have about it is, you're spending all this money on Flagler. Flagler is a street that goes from Biscayne Boulevard. It's going to take you past the courthouse.
I know what you're going to say.
It's going to take you to the library, and ultimately it's going to take you to the river. This is basically the meridian. Miami Avenue in Flagler is the meridian. You know how you come up with directions in Miami-Dade County. So you're spending all this money, and you do every 10 years to kind of reposition Flagler, just like Lincoln Road. Same way. If we change it, it's all going to go great. So where they're going with repositioning Flagler, and remember, Lincoln Road is Terra Nova. Flagler is going to be Moshi Mana, Old Man Mana. So Old Man Mana, yeah. So Old Man Mana's got most of Flagler, and it is dead. There's nothing going on there except a couple bars and things like that. Yeah. So I just wonder, based on places like City of Miami Beach, they have certain ordinances that say you can't have a bar within, I think it's 1,000 feet of a school or a church. So if you're going to have a school here, is there going to be any repercussions about how the development of Flagler goes? Because if there is any kind of ordinance or any kind of push towards an ordinance, school versus, drinking establishments or anything else, is that going to limit what Old Man Mana is trying to do on Flagler?
1,000 feet of a school or a public school?
Yeah. I think 1,000 feet of a school, a religious,
What about the tourists in
or
Ransom Everglades?
or like a park. No, I'm not saying the rule is here in Miami, but I could see as the students take hold, and I'm
Yeah, but I
thinking
mean,
about the centers.
downtown
I'm
Miami,
thinking
it's
about,
urban.
well, it's urban, but now you're bringing in, you're mixing in kids with, and I'm assuming they're kids. I don't know what the ages of the school, but you're mixing in kids. You're also mixing a very, let's say, plentiful homeless population, and you're going to be mixing in like boozers and all this. I'm not against it. I'm just saying this is a facet that I find very interesting. You're taking these kids and you're going to put them in an environment. Remember, Flagler's been like a no go. If you go walking around there, I used to walk there at night all the time, and I carried mace with me because I'd always get. I was more worried about the dogs than people would walk their dog and let the dog go on the chain, whatever. But it's a little bit of a. It can be a little sketchy. Maybe this
Sure.
leads to it improving. You got Julia and Henry. The
Never
food
been.
hall and stuff like that. Yeah, well, supposedly it's like two or three tacos are like $15, just to give you context.
Sounds about
So
right.
so it's in yeah, it's a very interesting. So I guess what I'm asking is, what does this mean for the direction of Flagler Street, and what does Old Man Mana, Mushy Mana, have to say with the fact you can now have a school there, and you're probably going to have restrictions there's going to be ripple effects of having students in an area, much like in Miami Beach, where there's a proximity.
So
And
wait,
if
you
you
think the
remember,
the city administrators are going to give a shit about the kids?
but
Wow, Peter, that's very
well,
positive
well,
of you.
well, what I'm saying is, you remember, a lot of people wanted to move into downtown Miami. They move into downtown Miami, and one of the things in downtown Miami, you got festivals like Ultra, Rolling Loud. You have all these festivals, and once everybody got in, they're like, dude, why are you making so much noise? I live in this condo, and now you're doing concerts. I need you to
It's
shut it down.
they don't
So is
call
this
it
the same
downtown
thing?
for nothing. If you don't want to live it, then go live in Coral Gables. Go live in Kendall. There's no ultra in Kendall. I don't think there is yet, at least.
But
Um,
but but I can see, as you start to bring in, like, let's say, the wealthier type, or you bring in school kids, there's probably going to be some sort of pushback. So I'm just wondering if the whole thing was thought out from a planning perspective. Like where is Flagler going? Is it going to be all like schools now? If you're going to make it a school district, that's fine. But how do you
that
how do
would
you
be
kind of
pretty
put the two
cool.
together?
Well, since they're not putting a school in Ken Griffin's building, I don't think they're putting anything in Ken Griffin's building because there is no building.
The
That's next
countdown is
week.
on
Next
for
week. It's
10
next week.
million.
Next week. Next week. Next week. Um, but that's a great proposal. Just turn it into a school district. Just have school buses all up and down Flagler. There was some talk about pedestrianizing Flagler. Every couple of years, some developer comes out and says we should pedestrianize the whole thing. No, because it's really nice to put on marketing materials. Hey, I'm building these buildings. Traffic, traffic. Who cares about traffic? There isn't going to be any traffic. There's no cars. I remember probably about a decade ago, there was a push related. George Perez made a push to close down that whole strip of South Miami Avenue from Coral Way, from the eastern end of Coral Way, all the way up to the river. And I think they tried it out, like they closed it down for a weekend or something. And even back then, I think this is pre Brickell City Center even. It
Yeah,
caused
it
so
was.
much havoc that they put a lid on that and they never did that again. And I think there was some talk about doing that on Flagler, but throughout all this construction that's been going on Flagler, and folks, if you're not from here, if you've never been to downtown Miami, Flagler is the east-west sort of artery that splits north from south. So if you go north, think of Flagler as 0 Street, and if you go north on Flagler, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if you go south of Flagler, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so it's like this middle section. Like if you were going to fold two halves of paper together, it's the crease. Well, this has been under construction for years, and it has created havoc in the traffic patterns. And for the small and medium businesses that line this street, the only thing that has really survived, as Peter pointed out, are a few dive bars. Some are pretty cool, actually, great burgers, um, but there's no parking. So unless you live in downtown, you're not patronizing any of these places. And now, since they've just reopened it, I haven't been since they reopened it. Is it nice? Or
There's nothing
they've opened
there.
this one section. There's nothing there.
There's not. I mean,
Well,
listen. Why don't
and so
they?
wait, this is interesting though. So they did all of this infrastructure work to Flagler, but the
Nothing.
buildings have not been redeveloped. So once they go to redevelop the buildings, they're going to fuck up the street again. I mean, that seems like a lack of forward planning.
There's no alley. How are you going to get the stuff into the place? There's no alley. So you got to bring them
Helicopter.
into the front.
We're going to turn into a helicopter town. Don't you see all the
Li-
helipads
li- li-
on all the
Listen,
buildings?
as a concept, everybody out in the Miami Downtown Development Authority, which is a taxing district in Greater Downtown Miami, that's meant to bring in cash so they can go ahead and they can promote the area. You guys have succeeded. Stop the marketing. We don't need any more marketing. Start doing something productive. What I would tell you to do, Miami Downtown Development Authority, turn Flagler into are you ready? A hub for schools. Turn it into all schools. Let
There we
people on
go.
Brickell send their kids to Flagler. Let people up in the Edgewater area, Wynwood, whatever. You can use public transportation, whether it's the Metro Mover, Metro Rail,
Yeah,
anything like
there's
that.
public transit. Sure.
You have the walkway of the street. That's for recess. Recess is always a big deal. If you remember the Centeners up at like 20th in Miami Avenue, that was a big
The
deal. They had to have
sports
someplace for.
complex.
Yeah. So why not just turn it into the hub? Put all the students together, and that'll be the niche. Maybe some of these old buildings that can be renovated, and you can turn them all into classrooms. Miami-Dade College isn't far away.
No, it's not. It's right there. I'm a buy on it. I'm a buy on that. I'm also a buy on this deal with the Olympia. I think it's great. You know,
Yep.
Gusman gave it to the Miami Parking Authority because he didn't give it to the city because he couldn't trust them in 1975, and then they relinquished control of it in the early 2010s to the city of Miami. City of Miami obviously didn't do anything with it, and now we've arrived to this point where it's been effectively given to the slam school. I'm a buy.
And I'm a buy as well because it's going to ensure that the building is still around. Without this, as based on what the city was doing, it probably would have gone the way of a lot of other landmarks in Miami. So I'm a buy as well.
All right. Now we're talking about my paycheck. Compass. Compass came out either today or yesterday that they are effectively swallowing Anywhere Real Estate. Anybody who doesn't know who Anywhere Real Estate is, you've probably, if you've ever purchased a home or transacted, you've probably heard of Century 21, Caldwell Banker, Cochrane, Sotheby's International. Those are all brokerages that sit under this entity called Anywhere Real Estate. They transact in hundreds of millions, billions of dollars a year in real estate. And those are all those little brands that feed up to Anywhere Real Estate. Compass, which is the largest brokerage by volume. I hold an office there in Coconut Grove. Robert Refkin, our CEO, who came to his growing moment, his growth moment was when they raised $1 bazillion from SoftBank about, what was that now, 5, 6, 7 years ago?
Yeah, probably something like that.
Right, and Compass absorbed or brought over all of these agents from all of these competing brokerages and has grown into this national behemoth. I think Compass employs or contracts, we have 1 in 5 agents in America are Compass agents. It's a lot. So now,
Wow.
with this acquisition, it effectively doubles Compass's footprint. And that's a big deal for a few reasons. One, it makes this behemoth, but also, if anybody who's been reading real estate news, there's been a very public battle between our CEO, Refkin, and Zillow. Zillow, everybody knows who Zillow is. You go on, you got the estimates, but I don't really hold Zillow to a terribly high regard. And maybe Refkin is watching this and he'll tip his hat to me for saying this, but it effectively, Zillow reduces realtors and our clients to nothing more than free content creators for the platform. Zillow's an aggregator. Zillow goes to the MLS and pulls our images, pulls our data, pulls everything, and then delivers it to you, right? And then Zillow has the audacity to sell us leads based on our data. And Refkin's like, this is bullshit, for lack of a better word. And over the last few years, especially since the NAR settlement, the National Association of Realtors settlement regarding transparency, and that's a whole other thing. But we've, within Compass and many other brokerages, including Douglas Elliman, which isn't part of Anywhere Real Estate, is doing this, we pre-market listings. So on the sell side, I know Peter doesn't do the sell side, but on the sell side, when we sign an exclusive listing agreement with a client, we are mandated to put it on the MLS, the multiple listing service. And that's how everybody knows, who's doing what. And we as realtors have access to the MLS. But now with this fight with Zillow to sort of keep information from them, we've started what we're calling private exclusives, which were pre-marketing properties off of the MLS beforehand. And the data coming out of this pilot is it's quite amazing. A, the transaction numbers are higher if we can pre-market on the private exclusives. And private exclusives, we're sharing those with Encompass and amongst other realtors. And now that Compass is going to be even bigger, that non-Zillow, non-MLS pool of properties will be even bigger. So it does a lot for us as agents at Compass. I think it helps a lot of our clients get more effective pricing feedback on their listings before it goes to the MLS, because everybody talks about the MLS. Oh, how many days has it been on the market? DOM. Oh, if it's been on the market for so many days, and that's a real data point. And for a property that's priced incorrectly, that can really hamper the effective transaction value at the end of that transaction. You know, once a buyer comes in and they say, hey man, this has been on the market for 160 days, I'm not going to pay you anywhere close to asking price. Well, with the private exclusives and that whole world off of the MLS, you don't accrue days on market as a seller. And I think that's a very powerful tool. So that's just a little background context of the bigger picture of, I think, why Compass decided to acquire Anywhere Real Estate. I think it's a scenario where the tide rises all boats for us as realtors. But Peter, you're not a realtor. You're on the buy side. I'm curious to hear your 2 cents about this.
Ooh, boy, a lot to sort of look at. So first and foremost, for disclosure, when they were first moving in, Robert and the team, I think Beth Butler was the one who was kind of leading the surge down here, at least down in Miami. You know, they tried to get us to, they would try to acquire us. Whenever you hear about a brokerage being acquired in South Florida, they're not acquired. Basically, they bring all your staff over and they say you don't have to pay any expenses anymore and you work under us. So just for disclosure at that point. So I remember when Robert first came down here was doing things, and he's real data oriented. And I looked at his age. He's 46. So I can't call him old man Refkin. Let's call him young man Refkin. So young man Refkin has this concept where he wants to basically
Wait, did you
modernize.
say young man Refkin?
Well, he's 46. So where I don't know what the cutoff is.
What's the cut? No. I'm just you've never said young man anyone, so you're always talking
Well,
old
because
man.
I looked up his age. He's 46 according to Wikipedia. So young man Rufkin is the face of the company. He's from Berkeley, California. He's a smart guy. He knows what the hell he's doing. He's got this concept. And let's be honest, the real estate industry, especially on the residential side, it's old. It's tired. It's led by dinosaurs who still want to do stuff back in the day and they want to have control. A year ago or so, when the National Association of Realtors and others entered in all these agreements because of antitrust or because of the way commissions were being paid, that was basically the warning shot. That was the beginning of the crack in the way that real estate was done from my perspective. In Zillow simply replaced what the newspapers used to do. Remember the Miami Herald, the New Times, stuff like that? If
Right.
you wanted to advertise something, well, that's what Zillow does now. They're effectively charging you like to run an ad, but instead of charging for the ad, they're charging the broker who wants to get any of the leads coming in. So nothing has really changed whatsoever. Now, what's interesting about Robert though is the reason he went public. By the way, Compass went public. They went public on the 1st of April 2021. They've been public a while, and let me tell you, if you bought their stock, you have gotten shellacked. They're down 61% during the course of its history. It's trading right now just under $8, $8 a share. They're down about $12.20 a share. So they went public. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. What it means is he's got access to capital. And what it seems like he's doing is he's rolling it all up. And this is something I talked about on the condo side, especially with associations. I think we're going towards a day when you are going to trade real estate, and there's certain, it's not perfect. You're going to be trading real estate like you book a flight, like you book a cruise, and like you book a rent a car. That's where I think we're going. And this is a big step, in my opinion, towards that. It's also a big step towards planting a spike right through the heart of the National Association of Realtors if they're able to
Absolutely.
do this. Yeah, because I mean, Daniel, let's be honest. What you're talking about is like this first look. That's really a pocket listing. That's all it
It's a
is. You have it. You shop it to people you know, and a lot of people have done that. But the National Association of Realtors, at least last I remember, that wasn't permitted. As soon as you got it, you had to sort of make it, and they look down upon pocket listings. But a lot of markets, this is how they do stuff. Like whether
sure.
you go to like Panama or you go to Colombia, or I think even New York does it that way, where the information isn't shared. So you go to a brokerage house, just like you would an investment
You look
banking
through a
firm.
catalog.
Yeah, you're going for a certain type of product, and then the brokerages, rather than simply grabbing any listing, they got a certain niche that they concentrate in, and it makes it a little bit easier. Just like you would go to Tiffany's, or you might go to Macy's or whatever to buy a certain type of product. So I really think that's where we're kind of going. And Robert's young man Rufkin, he's using the technology that all the old codgers, the dinosaurs that run the National Association of Realtors, that they're not using, and that I think gives them the first mover advantage. And he's got access to capital. People are buying into a story. Now, if he bought his stock, he got shellacked. But that doesn't mean he can't come back to fight another day. Remember, Amazon, they lost their ass forever. They weren't into making a profit. They were into building what they build. And Jeff Bezos was able to do that. Now he's like flying spaceships and getting married and pissing everybody off in Venice when he gets married. But who knows? Maybe Rufkin's playing the long game to try to roll up the whole residential industry, put a spike through the heart of the dinosaurs who were running the National Association.
He's trying to break the status
change
quo.
the world.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. So, I'm not giving stock advice. I don't know anything about the stock. I always know when he comes out, though. One thing I will say, when he comes on the CNBC, he can tend to like tightrope. He always leans positive. That's the only pushback I would give.
Of course, he's a showman. That's
yeah, but
that's
he's
what his
not that
board pays him to do.
Yeah, but he's not that charismatic to be able to do it. He seems more like somebody from the show Silicon Valley. If you ever watched that, you ever watched that?
Yeah,
TV
it's
show?
hysterical.
Yeah, well, the show is historical, but the personalities aren't necessarily. I mean, that's what he kind of reminds me of. He reminds me of a Silicon Valley person trying to take over the real estate, and many people in real estate are very personable. They're very extra. I'm not saying he's not extroverted, but it's kind of a weird kind of fit. But I mean, listen, if he can shake up the real estate industry, I am all for it. And if it's based on technology, I'm all for it. But if he puts a moat around all the information, you got to go to him. That I would be against.
I'm buying it. I'm biased, but what the heck? Aren't we all?
Yep. I'm a buy for change.
All right. Rounding out the end of our day, Miami housing squeeze from workforce deals to condo slides. There's a lot to unpack here. We have, where are we? We're at 51 minutes. Oh, we are running perfectly on time. I love this, Peter. Thank you.
Oh, I can change that.
So, one deal that we've spoke about in the last few weeks, gentleman by the name of Pablo Castro, Spanish guy, big Spanish developer, and then our own local Laura Tauber linked up. And I had mentioned it a few weeks ago in the pod that pod, by the way, is short for podcast. Somebody told me that. I said, hey, great, I love it. The pod, Buy, Sell, Hold Miami. That's where we are. So the largest Live Local Act to get announced, to get approved, I think even, 4,000 units, which is only just as big as the Swordlow development right next door over there in Little River, or West Little River. I didn't know we were splitting Little River into west, east, north, south by now, but apparently we are. So 4,000 workforce units, and every single one of them is going to be workforce. Why is that important? Because Live Local, which is state of Florida's workforce housing ordinance or law act, forces developers to allocate no less than 40% of that development for workforce housing. So I think the workforce housing cutoff is 120% of $87,200 a year if you're a single renter, right? If you're married, the number goes up a little bit. So $87,200 a year. Who is that attractive to? That's attractive to firefighters, policemen, teachers, nurses. So this is the product for you. But if the developer allocates 100% of that development for workforce housing, they get a full tax break. Why is that significant? It's significant because, sort of like what we talked about in our first topic of the day, if there's a full tax break, city, county, schools, they don't see any of the property tax revenue. So that's what this project is about. We talked about it the last few weeks because they were in the news, but they were in the news again this week is because they cut a deal with the unions. And I'm not sure what the legal is behind it is. Maybe you saw, maybe we should have an attorney on the show to talk about it. But they cut a deal with the unions so that those properties, those units would be exclusively for members of those unions, right? How do they get around fair housing laws? How does that work?
I mean, it sounds like a co-op. If you remember, that's how co-ops were started. Everybody in a certain
But
type
it's a
of industry.
rental.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm saying it's the same mentality of a co-op like you would have in New York City or anywhere else. Everybody in the industry would get together, they pull their cash, they go in there and they have a place to. So I mean, it's really kind of interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting, especially because what we keep on talking about on the show, and it's something that we should be talking about even more, I think, is the affordability crisis here in South Florida. I learned an acronym today. You ever heard of ALICE? ALICE? You ever heard of that acronym?
I,
Asset
I heard it
limited,
today.
income constrained, employed. Asset limited, income constrained, employed. ALICE, ALICE. And these are people who work, often earning too much to qualify for state assistance, but effectively living paycheck to paycheck. And that population down here is exploding. So these are people who make, you know, not minimum wage, but they might make 18 or 19 or $20 an hour. So they don't qualify for the assistance, but they can't really afford to do anything. So it's like I almost want to make less money because if I made less money, then I'd qualify for all these bennies. But and if I'm unable to make significantly more money because well I'm not a skilled worker or for whatever other reason, um, but that's a really dangerous place to be in. And then if you're a municipal administrator, that's a really dangerous number to see growing in your community.
So and what that number is, it's actually $21.11 an hour
It's
or 42,200
so
a
if you
year.
make more than $42,000 a year, you're shit out of luck.
Yeah, you're not Ellis, but if you're making 42 grand, you're part of the Ellis movement.
That's
According
awful.
according to Miami Herald article, yeah.
And then
So
and then
that's a single adult. A family is about 60 grand a year.
wow. So
Yeah,
so
it's not
back
much.
back back to the Hugh Hub, which is that it sits at the apex of live local developments, and we're going to be hearing about this for months and probably years to come because it's a massive development. If does it break ground? I don't know, but it is a massive development right there in Little River, next to the Swerdlow project that we talk about a lot because Swerdlow is in fact building a train station. That's their community. I don't want to call it handout. That's their what's the word for it, Peter?
Yeah,
What,
yeah, the
like
contribution.
the contribution. That's their contribution. They're
Yeah.
building a freaking train station, so it's not like they're giving $2 million to plant some trees in a park. I mean, they're building infrastructure, which I am. Thank you guys. That's great. I'm a big fan of that. The other side of this story or this topic is Miami, strongest homebuyer market in the nation. We have 9.7 months of supply, which if you ask some people, that would say a balanced market, but we know better than that. Balanced market is 6 months, guys. Not 6 to 8, not 6 to 9, not 9 to 12. I don't think anybody's saying that actually. But we have 9.7 months supply. So meaning it would take 10 months if nothing got listed today and we had things sitting on the market for the next 10 months, it would take 10 months for the board to be cleared. And Miami has the most of it, despite the crazy appreciation in prices. And we have a growing population of Alice's. So there is a perfect storm of affordability problems that are being had here. And you couple that with insurance, oof.
I mean, listen, everything you're saying is dead on. When you mentioned about the 4,000 units, just as a point of context, I always like to bring, just little tidbits. If you figure 1.5 people per unit and zero point 0.5 dogs, just sort of give that some thought when you're thinking about this for these 4,000 units and
I
stuff.
think the zero point 0.5 dog stat is the craziest one. There are a lot of freaking dogs here.
So just if you are moving in that area, make sure they got plenty of green space. Because if you're looking at these buildings in Greater Downtown Miami, there's not a lot of green space around it. But that's sort of a different issue. One of the reasons this came up is that the Ellis study was just published. It's put out by United Way, and United Way turned it over. Miami Herald, WLRN, a bunch of others took a shot at it. So in the Herald piece, they actually interview a woman. She's full-time employed. She's 63 or so. She's living in her car. She's got a full-time job. She's got to live in her freaking car because she can't afford it. She's making $16 an hour No, excuse me. She's making, yeah, $16 an hour, which is $3 more than the Florida minimum wage. Woman's making $16 an hour, can't afford to live. Why? Because you need $21 an hour in order to break through on this Ellis category. So Ellis is a
It's
nice
about
way
30. It's
of saying,
about $33,000 a year for those of you keeping track.
yeah. So, but here's the shocking part. It says that there's 527,000 households in the county that are Ellis. 54% of Miami-Dade
Wow.
County households are Ellis. Now let's drill down and let's get. Yeah, but you say, oh, that's the shitty neighborhoods. Nobody cares. Well, it's not. This is what the study says, and this is the part I think is interesting. So, Sweetwater. Remember we talked about Sweetwater? That's the
The
place that was
carnies,
started by the.
the
Yeah, it was started by
Russian midgets,
the Royal Russian Midgets
the
started
Royal
it
Russian
after
midgets. Yeah, right.
Royal Russian Midgets started it. So Sweetwater, 69% of Sweetwater is Alice. North Miami, 68%. Hialeah, 66%. Homestead, 62%. South Miami, dude, South Miami. That's like, oh, I live in South Miami. It's up and coming. South Miami, 60%. Everybody I know who lives in South Miami is a
60% of
doctor.
South Miami's Alice?
Everybody I know living in South Miami is a doctor. 60% of the community. City Miami's 56%. Miami Beach, 54%
Wow.
is Alice, which is the best market in terms of lowest percentage of households that are Alice. Miami Shores. Who's number two? Key Biscayne. Number three, Coral Gables. Gables comes in at what? 33%. So one out of every three people living in the Gables, well, in a household in Gables, is going to be part of this Alice. So this is a widespread problem.
Wow.
This is a serious issue that really needs to be dealt with. And and the beauty of a report like this, again, published came out by United Way, is it's putting on everybody's radar. And I think we really need to pay attention to this because we are on the brink. If you get a great recession again, something equivalent, or if you have this run up in tariffs and you have this inflation that's on its way up and you have a weakening job market, which is what forced Jay Powell in the Federal Reserve to cut rates. Old man Powell, he came to the realization he was dealing with inflation. He said, oh, whoa, 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 hold on. We didn't finish what we had to, but we need to shift over here because the job market's going sideways. And then we got all these people living on the brink. 69% of Sweetwater, 33% of the Gables. You want to lead to a downturn in housing? That's exactly how you do it. People lose jobs. They're already, they got to pay for that Maserati lease. They got to pay for the spa treatment, stuff like that. Next thing you know, it all goes sideways. And as the debt goes up and the repos go up and everybody's credit, their FICO scores start to fall, which is what's happening. We're on the brink of something very significant, and I hope just everybody can
That's scary.
understand what we're up against, and that's why you really need to buckle down. I'm of the opinion you really should be a minimalist right now. But if you're a minimalist right now and you're not spending a lot of cash, that's going to contribute to a slowdown in the economy. That's why restaurateurs have to lay people off. That's why we got all these cross currents right now. It's a very scary time for the economy unless you're a buyer. If you're a buyer and you're laying low and you're sitting on the sidelines and you're seeing old man Powell is cutting rates, and he's probably going to have to continue to cut them to bolster the job
Keep
market.
filling that
And
war chest, baby.
housing is so overinflated that it's going to have to pull back. And that you can save 21 grand a year according to bank rate by renting rather than owning. I would tell you start paying attention, start looking because that moment is probably coming. But I've been saying that for a while, so everybody say, yeah, that's all he says. So just pay attention to the details. Pay attention to the details. Stock market's up, but everything else is down, is what I would tell you.
It's what a time to be alive.
It is a time to. Yep. Are you going to wrap up the show? Because I want to throw one thing out if I could.
Throw it out.
Okay, so everybody always says, how do you know where you are in the cycle? And what do I tell them? I say, watch what the locals do, watch what the smart people do, and then you simply follow suit. And let me give you a for instance. One for instance is Crescent Heights, a big condo developer, residential developer. They sold their headquarters. These are the guys who bought a bunch of dirt during the Great Recession, very cheap. Why? Because they were buying when everybody else was selling. So Crescent Heights sold Swire Properties, big Hong Kong-based company that's been here since the late 70s, early 80s, that did Brickell City Center, did Brickell Key. They've effectively liquidated most of what they have here in terms of Brickell City Center and dirt. They're unloading, and supposedly they're going to build this condo tower, Mandarin
They're
Oriental
gonna
on Brickell Key.
build it.
We'll see. We'll see. So the last one I want to point out to you is let me put you in a time machine. I want you to go back. to back in the day when financing was readily available and condo speculation was widespread. Back then, you put down 20% on pre-construction, and that's how we built so many condos. Remember, Greater Downtown Miami went from 11,500 units in 40 years. Suddenly, we put up 22,000 in about a 7 to 8 year period. So we tripled inventory in 8 years effectively. So what happened is banks got shut down who were aggressive lenders. The lender at the time was called Chorus Bank. And why do I bring that up? Because some guy out of New York City with a company called Starwood, Barry Sternlicht, he sets up a
Barry.
company called he sets up a company called ST Residential. He's able to outbid everybody else, and he buys the prize portfolio of a bank called Chorus, which is out of Chicago. They were the aggressive lender. And Daniel, if you don't know who the aggressive lender is right now, I'll tell you off camera because I don't need any cease and desist or anything or lawsuit threats. But Chorus was the one that went down. Barry came down and he bought. He bought the portfolio and he ended up with buildings. Now get this. He ended up with buildings like Mint. He ended up with buildings like Ivy. He ended up with buildings like Paramount. In terms of owning it, the amount of excess inventory that was out there and the access that's ST Residential, which was the entity that bought the portfolio when the feds effectively shut down Chorus, was widespread. So where am I going with all this? Because you're saying you're going on and on and on and on and on and
I'm
on.
not
You talk
saying
about
anything.
Crescent
I'm
Heights.
sitting here listening like the good pupil that I am.
You hear about Swire, you hear about Crescent Heights. I say you listen to the local, and you say, what the hell do I care about Barry Sternlicht? Well, Barry Sternlicht has been involved with the Standard. The Standard is this hotel. He's trying to reposition it. Went in
Ooh.
for approval. He went in for approval. He wanted to blow it out. He's getting old man Sternlicht. He's
$61
getting up there
million
in age.
redevelopment.
Yeah, so he's getting up there in age. And so old man Sternlicht, he wants to improve the place and he wants some of his old buddies, all the old codgers to be coming into the Standard. And the thing is kind of, it's past its prime. So they want to spend some money and they get into a situation where City Miami Beach won't sign off on it. So what is Barry doing?
He well,
Apparently he's not going forward.
well. I mean,
So
they
where am I?
tried to pay off the Belle Isle Residents Association with $1.2 million. Nobody knew about that, by the way. Nobody knew about it. Even David Suarez, the commissioner at Miami Beach, is saying like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this, man.
Yeah, but what is the difference between a city asking for a park and asking a developer to redo a park or like you were saying Flagler or whatever? So where am I going with this? So Barry, old man Sternlicht is canceled. He scrapped his plans for a $62 million redevelopment plan on Belle Isle, which is a little island when you go from Miami Beach over to the
I'm gonna
mainland
pull it
at a
up for
place
the
called
gang.
the Venetian Causeway. Yeah, yeah. So this was the first bridge. This was the first bridge when you went across to Miami Beach when you
It's
could
right
drive your
here.
car. Old man Collins built it way back in the day. Yeah. So old man Sternlicht, today's old man Sternlicht, he decides he's scrapping the $62 million, and you say, oh well, who gives a shit? It's an old, these guys are getting into a pissing match, paying off the residents. That's exactly what the city wants each and every time, but they make them do it in the form of contributions for a park or whatever. So, but what's the big deal is? Well, the big deal is Carlos Russo is going forward and building a bunch of condo projects, and he's using the Standard brand. So what did that sort of call into question about the brand of the Standard over on the mainland and going forward? If because it was banked on they were going to turn this rock star place, but if it's some old rundown shithole, are you going to be able to leverage the Standard, which the origins is coming from Belle Isle? I'm just saying it creates all kinds of issues
No,
on
but the
two fronts.
Standard's a global brand. The Standard's got the High Line in New York. They got hotels all over. But
Yeah,
I
but I'm
do get
saying
it.
locally though.
Yeah, the local hotel. That's like if the Addition on the beach was a piece of crap and they're trying to launch the Addition over here with the Two Roads development on that building that they're never going to be able to knock down, by the way. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
No, I
But
totally get your point. They wanted to make a sexy new hotel, not new hotel, but redevelop this one. They weren't going to add any rooms. They were just going to put, to use your words, lipstick on the pig. I mean, really nice lipstick, like really expensive impact glass lipstick. Because all things considered, the Standard, as cool and as vibey as it is, kind of old. I mean, look, I mean, you don't really get a good view on it here, but
yep.
I mean, it's nothing to write home about. It's a 60s era. It's got the same pinta as one of those motels up Biscayne, except it's on the water, right? Very nice.
So
Can't discount that.
so I guess my point is, do we put this in the category that Sternlicht is basically scrapping it, even though they've invested so much in trying to push that Standard brand? throughout South Florida with these condo developments and the hotel development. You got one in Midtown. You got one going up on Brickell. So what do you sort of make of that? And so is this a tell, or is this simply a pissing match between the city of Miami Beach and the residents, as well as versus Old Man Sternlick and his billions, as well as his wealthy buddies?
I think it's a bit of both. I definitely do think the pissing match has something to do with it, and he's probably sort of like what happened with the Centners when they were embroiled with the whole Alex Diaz-La Portilla thing, and then the little sports complex they wanted to build off across the street from their school. He literally went into a city commission meeting. I watched it when people were getting up to the mic and rah, 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 rah. He went up to the mic, he went up to the lectern and said, I'm pulling it. I'm out. I don't want to deal with you freaking people anymore. And maybe that's what Sternlicht's doing. He's like, God, fuck it. Now, will that harm Carlos Rosso's projects going forward? I don't think so. I think what we do here, what condo developers do in terms of their marketing is you can't discount it. It is amazing. You are able to sell something that you don't even have the money to sell yet. You don't even have the money to put a shovel in the ground. And some developers are able to sell out of their buildings. 50, 60%. The bankers say you need about 50% pre-sales to get your construction loan. So you've sold 50% of nothing just based off of, pamphlets. So
they've been doing it for 100 years.
Right,
100 years in South Florida.
Right. Exactly. So and we've gotten very, very, very good at it. And Carlos Rosso is a smart guy. I think the Standard brand is strong enough to survive a non-redevelopment on Belle Isle. People still hang out at the Standard. It's still a cool spot. It's on the water. Look at the picture. I mean, it's really freaking cool. Now, could it use a revamp, much like Lincoln Road needs some lipstick? Sure. But if your question is, will the fact that they're not redeveloping this harm sales of the Standard residences? He already sold out the one in Brickell. That's sold out, supposedly. And then
let's see if they show up.
Right. Are you going to come to the closing table?
Yeah, but what if Old Man Sternlick, what if he dumps it? What if he says, you know what, I'm out. I don't want anything to do with the Standard anymore. I'm going to dump it to somebody else and blah, 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 blah. I'm just saying.
He dumped it to somebody else. So what?
But does it become critical in terms of because I mean, think about it. You're on an expansion campaign down here where you're putting this Standard everywhere. You're taking it off the island. You're putting it all over the mainland, and you're pitching a product. And now suddenly, if the original project is sort of sketchy and you can't, because you've admitted the building, it sucks. That's why you need to do the renovation. So
$530 a night if you want to stay there tonight, by the way.
But you've admitted it needs work. So now you've told your clientele it's an old shithole. We need to do something. So that's why we're doing it. You've tried to pad everybody, apparently, according to the press reports, all of the residents, which I don't,
$1.2 million is a paltry sum, by the way.
But how does that translate over on the mainland? How do you go into a branding expansion mode if what you're expanding is in disrepair? Apparently, because that's why you're doing a renovation.
No, but what I'm saying is that there's standards all over the world. I mean, I think the brand supersedes what's there on Belle Isle. It's not it's not the Best Western residences. It still does have some brand value and some brand appeal. That's my 2 cents.
So you don't think it's a tell though, but you don't think it's a tell.
Is it a tell? It's a tell that the city of Miami Beach is a pain in the ass to deal with. Yeah, that's the tell. But that was no surprise.
It's not Sternlicht. But it's not Sternlicht scrapping it. You don't think he would have gone back to the table and tried to work a deal if he was that committed?
Maybe he tried. Maybe he tried. The article was like 6 words long, but that's what you get from journalists that you pay Alice-like wages to. If that was on the rundown, I'm a hold on it because I don't have enough information. I'll be the first to say that I don't know. But in terms of what we do have on the rundown, Miami's housing squeeze, shit. I mean, I'm a buy on the facts. We told you guys. I encourage anybody who has a computer or access to Google, just Google United Way Alice Miami search if you want to get a little terrified of those numbers. I mean, those are numbers. The data's there. Andy Anson. Thanks, Andy. It's horrifying. So I'm a buy on that. There's not a terrified button on that, because if there was, that's what I'd be pressing. What
Yeah.
are you on that, Peter?
No, no. I listen. I'm a buy on the report. I'm a buy on United Way bringing us forward. I'm a buy on the fact that we might have an opportunity before everything goes sideways to try to address this. Unfortunately or fortunately, we're probably not
But
going to.
is live local the answer? And I mean, I don't mean to open up a whole other can of worms before we got to let everybody go. But is live local the answer to that? Is it the TSND ordinance? Is it RTZ? Because something's got to be done. Do we have to up the minimum wage? I don't know.
I think the big thing is the NIMBY, not in my backyard. I think the NIMBY jams up the zoning, which slows down the process, which makes it almost to the fact it's not cost effective. And then you factor in these people who have a homesteaded property. They don't have to sell because they're locked in at a tax rate from 1990. That you know what I'm saying? I'm
Or
saying
even
that the
further, or even
combination.
older. Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in California. And I know you can't say California in the state of Florida because people get pissed off. But California adopted a policy to change zoning and make it much more possible for like mother-in-law's quarters. I don't know if that's politically correct, but that's what they
Yeah,
called it.
you're
Um,
talking ADUs, accessory dwelling units.
yeah. Exactly. So I mean, we got to tinker with something, and we can't keep reclaiming Everglades. Just because, not that it's an environmental take, but it's simply a fact that you got to put in infrastructure. You got to put in a lot of infrastructure. We got a lot
Right.
of dirt that can be infill development, and I think they need to make it easier, and then we can deal with this issue because, as they said, 1 out of 3 households in Coral Gables, ritzy Coral Gables, 1 out of 3 is Alice, and then Miami Beach. 54% is on this Alice list. I mean, these are shot.
That
Key Biscayne.
is that's shocking.
Yeah, Key Biscayne is what, 28%. So, all the fat cats in Key Biscayne, basically more than 1 out of 4 households, they're living paycheck to paycheck, if you can believe that. Key Biscayne, where they have the nice manicured soccer field right in the center of the city. So just let that sink in.
Or they're lying on their tax returns.
An economist once told me when they came out with the 2000 census that marked Miami as the poorest big city in the United States. I was a journalist at the time. I interviewed an economist, and I'm like, how does this go? I see like Lamborghinis and McLarens, and we're the poorest big city. He goes, Miami tends to work on a cash economy. So, to your point, I think there's a certain element involved there.
There's some truth to it. All right, Peter. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up for everybody today. Thanks for sticking with us. If you tuned in the middle, hopefully you learned something. If you stuck with us the whole time, thank you so much. We are back to our regularly scheduled programming live every Friday Eastern Standard Time at 4 p.m. You get Peter Zalewski of the Miami Condo Club and myself, Daniel Hernandez. I am a realtor at Compass. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week at 4.